is February the 22nd, 2001. I am interviewing Esther Green, who is also my mother. Let's begin with how old you are.
I'm 88 years old. I'll be 89 next month.
Okay. How long have you lived in Casey?
Just about all of my life.
Okay. All right. So you've got a wide background here. Tell me about your parents. Why don't we start with your father? Tell me who he was and what you remember about him, what kind of work he did, what his life was like.
Well, my father was William Howard Bell, and he drove a truck, and he was an express agent.
He was known as Howard to his friends,
Well,
wasn't
yes, he was known as Howard in Casey, and people knew, a lot of people knew him. A lot of people asked him to move their pianos and their stoves and so forth, because he had a
moving business.
Yes, he was in the moving business too. He moved people.
He pretty much did whatever he had to do to make a living.
Yes, yes, he did. Yes, he did. He just did a lot of things that brought in a little bit of money.
Did he live in Casey all his life?
Yes, from about the age of 2, I think, if I remember right. And he lived here. He's lived here all of his life.
And I remember that he had a fix-it shop at his house.
Yes, he did. He had a fix-it shop, and a lot of people brought lawnmowers down there to be sharpened.
And saws.
And saws too, to have them sharpened.
Okay. Is there anything else that stands out in your mind about your father?
I can't think of it very much.
Okay. Tell me about your mother.
My mother was Velma
Fusen.
Sarah Fusen Bell. And she was a very, very good mother. And she was a splendid cook. And she loved to have company. She used to do laundry for people.
Anything else?
I can't think of anything else.
She was pretty active in church work, wasn't she?
Well, yes, she went to church and was very active there. She sang in a quartet. She sang the bass, I think it was.
Oh, did she?
In a quartet.
Uh-huh. And I happen to know that her father, your grandfather, was fairly well known in this community. Tell me about your grandfather, Fusen.
Well, my grandpa was W.A. Fusen, and he was a preacher, a good old-fashioned Baptist preacher, and he organized the Methodist, or the Marshall Baptist Church.
The Marshall Baptist Church?
Yes.
Did he? I didn't know that.
And there's a Bible in the church that was dedicated to him. A big Bible.
Uh-huh. And that's in the Marshall Church?
And it's in the Marshall Church.
Was he affiliated with the Clarksville Baptist Church as well?
Yes, he was. He lived for several years in Clarksville and was pastor of the church, of the Baptist church there. He was there when they built the brick church building. The church that he used to be pastor of was a wooden weatherboarding on the outside. And He was the pastor of that church during the building program.
Might that have been during the Marshall Church program building?
No, I don't
No.
think it was the same time.
Okay. Okay. All right. He also organized a state organization, as I recall, or was instrumental in organizing the state Southern Baptist Convention, was he not?
I can't remember for sure, but it just seems to me that he was one of the men that was instrumental in setting up the guidelines for the Southern Baptist Convention.
Is there anything in particular that you remember about your grandfather?
I can't remember very many things about him, but I know all you had to do was ask him a question about something about the Bible, and he'd preach you a little sermon every time.
Every time.
Yes.
I
And he was pastor of the Green Baptist Church too for quite a while. In fact, I think he's the one that organized that church over there and started it. And he lived right back of it for a while.
He was also pastor at Westfield for a while, wasn't he?
I can't remember that.
Yeah. Was he ever pastor at Casey?
No,
No, never in Casey. No.
not that I can remember.
Okay. I remember primarily that his voice was very, very loud, and he scared me. But I
Yes.
adored him too, and of course that's when I was a very little child too. Okay, tell me about your brothers. I know you have 3 brothers. Why don't you start with the oldest one and tell me his name and what he did and a little bit about him.
Yeah, I had 3 brothers, and my oldest brother was William Vernon Bell, and he worked in the express office downtown.
What did people call him?
Bud, they called him Bud or Bussy,
Mm-hmm.
and he did a lot of work helping Dad do moving and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Anything else that you remember about him?
I can't remember. I know he used to play a guitar, and he had a real nice singing voice.
He used to ride a motorcycle too, I
Oh
believe.
yeah, he rode a motorcycle a lot, and I can remember really well when motorcycles were gathered in the road in front of the house, and the boys would play hockey.
What would they hit?
Tin cans,
Oh, really?
yeah, and they'd have a lot of fun doing that.
Uh-huh.
But that I can't remember much of anything else.
Okay.
And the second brother was Robert Fusen Bell, and he played a trumpet, and he played in the school band and in the city band, and
And people called him?
Bob,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a nice singing voice too. And he was real active in being an MC for different gatherings in the town that the people would ask him to do.
And he had a business
Oh yeah, he had a jewelry store
in Casey.
in Casey, and he worked on watches and so forth, and sold rings and necklaces and that sort of thing.
Do you remember how long he had that store open in Casey?
No, I don't know how long, but it's been several years.
Yeah.
In fact, he opened his store when while the express office was still in that building.
And your third brother?
Well, my third brother was Howard Dale Bell, and he had a good singing voice too. And he was really outstanding. He went to a national and
Nancy,
sang
can
a
you dial
solo.
19, please? Nancy, dial 19.
And one time he left home without telling anybody. He went to Chicago and sang on the radio for the I can't remember
Morris B.
now.
Sachs.
Morris B. Sachs program.
Mhm.
And I don't remember the name of the song that he sang, but it was one that I bought for him. And he learned to sing it at home and then went to Chicago and sang the same song there. And people voted for him.
And he came in third, I recall.
Oh, yeah, and I think he was in third place in that contest.
His voice was very similar to a famous singer, Tennessee Ernie
Yeah,
Ford.
there were a lot of people who thought he sang like Tennessee Ernie Ford,
Mm-hmm.
and he looked an awful lot like him too.
What was it like for you when you were growing up as a child with three younger brothers? Okay, go.
Well, I don't think my brothers caused me much trouble as we were growing up at home, because they just didn't seem to know that I was around a lot of times. So I had a pretty uneventful growing up period.
Were you responsible for doing a lot to help take care of them?
No,
Since you were the oldest?
no, I didn't have very much to do with
Okay.
taking care of the boys when they were growing up, because we just depended on Mother to do that.
What was cooking and preparing meals like then? Do you remember any of those details?
I didn't do very much about cooking or any of those things.
Do you remember what your mother did?
Mother cooked a lot, and
What kind of a stove did she use?
she had a coal range early in our childhood, and then she had a gas stove, and she baked a lot of bread, and she made angel food cakes for people. They were lovely angel food cakes.
I mean, she'd make them
And-
to sell?
Yes.
Okay.
She didn't make them to sell. She made them when people asked her to make a cake for them, and then she'd make the cakes. She always used at least a dozen eggs, egg whites, in the baking the angel food cakes.
All right, go ahead. Are there any other memories that you have of the cooking experience?
Mother always cooked soup beans on Mondays when she washed,
Oh, really?
and then she would iron on Tuesdays.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember much about her cooking.
Okay. What about the neighborhood? Do you remember what the neighborhood was like when you were growing up?
I don't remember very much about the neighborhood and about the neighbors, but my best girlfriend lived about a block away from where we used to live, and I'd go down there a lot, and she would come to my house occasionally, but I don't I just don't remember very much about the neighborhood.
Okay. Where did you go to school when it came time for you to start school?
I went to the North Side grade school to begin with, and then I went to high school.
What is the North Side grade school now?
Roosevelt School
All right.
is the North Side grade school now.
Okay. And you went to high school in Casey?
Yes, I went to high school in Casey.
And at that time, how many buildings did it have?
There was just one building at that time. And during my senior year, they started to build the gymnasium across to the west of the building we were in.
Okay, all right. Did they have tennis courts then, a football field, track?
Yes, we had all those things. We had tennis courts, and we had a football field. And the boys in the school went out for track a lot.
Okay. Are there any particular memories that you have of your high school years or your grade school years, either one? Anything that stands out in your mind?
I was in the glee club in high school, and I enjoyed so much singing in the glee club after school. We always had our extra activities after school. We didn't have them during school.
Did you date when you were in high school?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Was dating something that was prevalent in high school, with high school kids at that time?
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
Not a lot, no.
Okay. Then what happened after you graduated from high school? What did you do?
I went to work at the telephone office as a night operator, and I worked there for several months. And one of my brothers always went with me to stay all night.
To protect you?
Yes, my mother and dad were afraid for me to go to the telephone office all night and stay by myself. So they had one of the boys to go with me. And I always made him a bed on the day bed. And he went to bed and slept all night. And I would take a nap too in front of the switchboard.
It was an old plug-in switchboard?
Yeah, it was an old plug-in switchboard.
And you were the only telephone company employee during the night?
Yes, I was the only
one
there.
who was there.
The only one all night.
Okay.
I went to work at 9 o'clock at night and worked until 7 the next morning.
That's a long
And
shift.
Yes, and I made 13 cents an hour
Wow.
for those. I think it was it 10 hours
Yeah.
from 9 the night
Till
before
7,
to 7 the
yes.
next morning.
Yeah.
So that's the way I worked.
Wow. How long did you do that?
Several months, and until I could make enough money to pay for my uniforms and books because I was planning on going into nurses training, and I wanted to work enough to make enough money to pay for my books and my uniforms. And when I had enough money, then I quit and went on the train with my great Aunt Nellie to St. Louis to go into nurses training at Missouri Baptist Hospital.
What year was that?
1930,
Okay.
in June of 1930.
All right. Okay. So you completed your nurses training there?
Yes, I went for 3 years in nurses training.
And what do you remember about that experience?
Well, there was so many things that I remember that I can't,
Well, is there one or two things that stick out in your mind?
uh, Bing Crosby had a program on the radio at night at 10 o'clock. We were supposed to be in our rooms at 10 o'clock, but we asked the house mother to let us listen to this program for 15 minutes before we had to go to our rooms, and she let us do that. And I remember that real well.
This was in the residence where you
Yes.
stayed while you were in school?
In the nursing home.
Okay.
And we lived right across the street from the hospital.
Your classes were at the hospital?
Yes.
Okay. And when you say nursing home, you mean it was a home for student nurses?
Yes, it was a
Okay.
home for student nurses. We had classes all morning during our probation period, and we worked on the wards in the afternoon.
And then you graduated in 1933?
Yes, I graduated in June of 1933 and had to stay there for a little while to make up for the time that I was sick and had to miss some of my training. So it was late in July before I got out.
Okay. And then what happened after you graduated?
There wasn't anything for the nurses to do when they got out of nurses training, and they told us that we'd better go home. So that's what I did. I came home and went to work in the shoe factory.
In Casey?
Yes, in Casey, Illinois. And I worked there for quite a while.
And when did you get a job as a nurse then? And where?
My very first job as a nurse was in 1940, I believe, at the Florence Crittenden Home for Unwed Mothers in Terre Haute, Indiana.
Okay.
And I worked there for several years. Miss Oakley was the superintendent at the Florence Crittenden Home at that time. And we delivered the girls at the home. We had a delivery room and a nursery. And we delivered the girls there at the home.
And then after you had been there for a number of years, where did you go to work?
I went to the Union Hospital in Terre Haute and worked there. Worked on the fourth floor. And
You were a ward nurse?
yes, I was a ward nurse, and then I got to be the head nurse.
Where did you work after you worked at Union Hospital?
We moved back to Casey, and I went to work at the Johnson Clinic.
And who were the doctors there then?
The doctors there was Dr. L.H. Johnson and Dr. Howard Johnson.
What about Dr. Eugene?
He was in the Navy,
Oh, okay. All
and he didn't come until a little bit later on.
right. All right. When he got out of the Navy, then he came and joined the clinic.
When he got out of the Navy, he came to Casey
Okay.
and went to work at the clinic. And it wasn't long after that until Dr. Lorenz came. So that was 4 doctors we had then.
Right. Do you remember how long you worked for them?
I worked for the Johnson Clinic for, I don't remember exactly, but it was over 20 years.
Okay. And then at some point in time, you left them and went to the nursing home here in Casey.
Yes, after so long a time, it was over 20 years, I resigned there and came and worked at the nursing home, the nursing home for aged people, and I worked nights at that institution.
And that's where you retired from then, when you retired, right?
And then I did retire finally, and that was in 1983, I think. I think it was 1983.
Okay. We haven't talked about your marriage. When did you get married the first time?
I got married the first time on February the 2nd, 1935,
Okay.
and I was married in West Union.
Okay. Did Grandpa Fusen marry you?
No,
No?
it was a preacher named Shields. He was a close friend of Grandpa's,
Okay.
and he was having a revival at West Union at that time, and that's the reason we went there and asked him to marry us.
And the name of your husband was?
Owen William Kite.
All right. And then he died a few years later. And then, yeah. At some point in time, you met George Green.
That
and
was
you-
after I went to Logansport and worked at the state hospital and in Logansport.
Right. How did that fit in with your other career moves? Where was that in between? Which career move was the time at Logansport?
I was working at Union Hospital, and they wanted somebody from their staff to go to Logansport and attend lectures there and come back to Union Hospital and do those lectures to the student nurses.
Okay.
So
And you did that?
that's what I chose to do.
Okay. And then somehow or another you wound up working at the state hospital at Logansport.
Yes, that's what I did. I finally went to work at the state hospital in Logansport.
Okay. Okay. And that was where you met George Green.
Yeah, I met George at Logansport. He was an orderly on the men's ward, and I met him up there.
And do you remember when you were married to him?
I can't remember exactly when we were married, but it was 5 or 6 years after Owen died
Okay.
that we were married.
Okay. What historical events stand out in your mind, whether they're local, national, or worldwide, that occurred during the time that you grew up and were coming into adulthood and throughout adulthood?
I can remember very well when Harding was elected, and we had a great big picture of Harding, and we fixed a sign, and we had a little parade up and down the walk in front of our house to kind of celebrate Harding's election. I can remember that real well.
Why was everybody so glad he had been elected?
Well, now that I can't remember.
Okay, all right. When you say you had a large picture of him, this was on the wall in your house?
No, it was a paper picture that that was just a big poster.
Oh, okay, all right, like big posters, okay.
And we fixed a frame and put the big poster on that frame.
Okay, and that was for your parade?
And that, yes, that was for
Okay.
our parade.
Okay. Any other events that you can recall?
I remember very well, and so does everybody else, the day that John F. Kennedy was killed.
Sure, sure.
And we just listened to the radio and watched television for 3 or 4 days, watching all the activities that were going on.
Speaking of television, let's digress just a moment here and tell me, when did television enter your life?
It's when you and I and George were living out in the country west of Casey, and we had a black and white television.
That would have been about 1953 or 54, wouldn't it?
I think so. I think it was around that time that we bought our first television from Charles Sherman.
People now can't imagine what life was like without television. When you were a child and a young woman, how did you spend your time? What kinds of things did you do? You didn't have television to entertain you.
The things that we did for entertainment when I was a kid, we played with our dolls, and we made paper dolls. We cut them out of catalogs and made our paper dolls and paper dresses. And we made mud pies and baked them in our little ovens.
Mm-hmm.
And we skated once in a while with one skate on one foot.
Why not two skates?
I was afraid I'd fall down,
Oh, I see.
so I just used one skate.
Okay. Well, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Anything else that you can recall?
Well, not just right off, I can't.
Okay. Well, on behalf of the Marshall Public Library and its Oral History Project, I want to thank you very much for your time and your willingness to answer all these questions.
Well, you're real welcome.
This is an addendum to the interview. This interview of Esther Green was conducted by her daughter, Beth Weisgerber, at the Heartland Manor Nursing Home in Casey, Illinois. The location is the reason for the considerable background noise. It should be noted that Esther Green's health has required that she be on oxygen at all times for almost 5 years now, and this accounts for her occasional reticence and the vocal problems she experienced during this interview. She is very alert for her age and medical condition, but she is aware that she has lost a great deal of her memory because of the oxygen use. This is upsetting to her and caused her to be very nervous throughout the interview.